In this short demo, we're going to learn about TDD, and we are going to build an app which purpose is to sum integer numbers. The name of our app will be Kata StringCalculator. And if you notice, we have different layers, starting with the test, a business logic, and the Kata client, that is this web interface. For instance, we can send an empty string to a method and the result will be 0. We send a single number and the result will be that number. Easy, isn't it? But also we can send a string containing different numbers using a comma as separator, or using a new line as separator, or sending any separator like this. Our goal will be to build this app using TDD, and that means starting with the test. TDD, or test-driven development, is a software development process that relies on the repetition of a very short development cycle. The developer writes an automated test case, then produces the minimum amount of code to pass the test. Finally, refactors the new code to acceptable standards. We can appreciate in this graphic the development cycle. For example, we write the test, check if the test fails. The new test should fail for the expected reason. This step increases the developer confidence that the unit test is testing the correct constraint and passes only in intended cases. So we have to be sure that the test fails. The next step is to write some code that causes the test to pass. The new code written at this stage is not perfect and may, for example, pass the test in an inelegant way, and is acceptable because it will be improved in the next step. If all the test cases now pass, the programmer can be confident that the new code meets the test requirements and does not break or degrade any existing features. If they do not, the new code must be adjusted until they do. Finally, we clean up the code or refactor the code, and we are ready to add a new test. Let's review this with the demo. We are going to need the Visual Studio 2012 or higher and JetBrains ReSharper 9.x. Let's create our first project. A class library called Kata Test. The name of the class StringCalculator test. Hit Alt Enter and rename the file to match the type name. So you notice I got ReSharper installed. Next step is go to View, Other Windows, Package Manager console, and install package NUnit. So we are going to use NUnit for this demo, which is a unit testing framework for .NET. And you will notice that a reference is added to our project, NUnit framework. This will help us to create our test methods. Okay, we got the environment ready, but we don't know yet what are we going to do. So let's review the requirement. The string calculator comes from Roy Osherov website. It is an exercise that will help us understanding TDD development. So in this case the requirement says create a simple string calculator with a method int add string numbers. It says that the method can take 0, 1 or 2 numbers and will return their sum. For an empty string it will return 0. For example, the empty string, a number, or 1, 2 numbers. It says start with the simplest test case of an empty string and move to 1 and 2 numbers. So let's start with the empty string, which is the simplest test case. That will be a public void add empty string. The result that will return 0. Or we can rename this method so it will be more explicit. For example, add and sum an empty string that will return 0. The naming in the method should express the expected input and state. So in this case, we can split the name of the method. So any programmer that reads this method can have an idea of what the method is doing here. So we start with the unit. The first part of this naming is the unit, so we can name it with the action. In this case, add. Then we move to the scenario. What is going to do this? What is the method going to do? Sum an empty string. And then the expected result to return 0. We mark the method with this attribute, the test. This way, .NET will know it's a test method and will allow us to run it. For TDD, inside of a method, we have a pattern that we can follow. First, we have the arrange, then we have the act, and finally the assert. So let's arrange our method. So I will need a class called StringCalculator. Hit Alt Enter, and I'm going to create this class. So the arrange means initialize or instance an object. In the act, I know I have to have a method called add, and will receive an empty string. Can create this method and the numbers parameter. I know this will return 0. Okay, if it's an empty string. So I can have a result that receives an integer 0. And then I can assert that 0 will be equal to that result. And this will be my first test. If you remember the development cycle for TDD, first I create my test and make it fail, and try to make it pass. Finally, when it passes, I can create another method, and each time in each cycle I have to refactor my method. So since this is a basic, the simplest test, I do not have any refactoring. So let's continue with the next step. Let's add the number 1. So we got the empty string. The next test will be add a number, the number 1. So let me do a copy and paste, and our test name will be add sum number 1. That will return 1. This will be my next test. So I'm going to send 1 as a string and assert that this result will be equal to 1. So let's refactor our method. So in this case, we could say that if the numbers is null or empty, I can return 0. If not, I can return 1. Let's run our test. We can do it right-clicking the project and run unit test. So if you notice, both tests passed. So let's create the other scenario. So we got the empty string, we got the 1, but now we got to sum 1 and 2 numbers. Let's copy this test, give it a name, sum number 1 and 2, and it would return 3. Let's pass the string, and now we assert that 3 will be equal to result. Let's refactor our method. So now we got a problem. This statement is no longer necessary because I don't want to create many if statements, because this string could be different numbers like this. So I don't want to do an if for each number. So let's get rid of this and split the numbers. So now we are going to receive a string with a comma separator. So I'm going to split the numbers. Going to use a for each. Also, I'm going to create a variable number and try to parse the string with an out for that number. Create a sum variable and sum that number. Finally, return the sum. So I have to be sure that this new method will not break any test that I have made. So let's try it. We are good. All tests passed. If we check the next step, it will be allow the add method to handle an unknown amount of numbers. So we only have test 1 and 2. So let's try with more numbers. We're going to create a new test, sum number 1 and 2 and 5, and it will return 8, 1, 2 and 5. We pass the string and we assert that 8 will be equal to this result. So we run the test, all pass it, we're good, but we have to do the refactoring. Each time we create a test and try to do refactoring. So in this case, I think we are good. So let's continue with the next requirement. Next, we have to allow the add method to handle new lines between numbers instead of commas. So the following input is okay. We add the new line and a comma 2, and this will be equal to 6. Okay, this is the next step. So let's create this scenario. We copy this last method and we are going to say sum number 1 and 2 and 5 using new line as a separator. So it would return 8, but we have to use a new line. We run our test and we got this fail test. And if you double click, it said expected 8 but was 5. So it could not split this but it did split the 5, and it would have returned and did return the 5, and that is not assert, are not equal. That's why it fails. So we have to refactor our method in order to include this new separator. And that's easy. We almost got it here. So I'm just going to add the new line, run the test again, and we're good. So check if I can refactor the method, and I think not. Let's continue with the next requirement. So it said the following input is not okay. 1, comma, a new line. No need to prove it, just clarifying. Okay, next, support different delimiters. To change a delimiter, the beginning of the string will contain a separate line that looks like this. / the delimiter, new line, numbers. And here's an example. / semicolon, new line, 1 semicolon 2. So this will tell us that we have to use the semicolon. And we can split only these two numbers. And it says it should return 3, where the default delimiter is the semicolon. Also, it said the first line is optional. All existing scenarios should still be supported. Okay, this looks a little bit more difficult, but let's see how we do it in TDD. So we create the test. We name the method sum number 1 and 2 and 5 using different delimiters, and it should return 8. So we create our string / semicolon new line, and we separate the numbers with the semicolon, and we assert that A will be equal to this result. So let's run our test, and it fails. It says expected 8 but was 0. So this is not handled in our method. So let's see how to refactor it. We can, for example, create a list of chars for the delimiters and include the comma and the new line. We can ask if the numbers contain //. If they do, we can get the numbers excluding the //. Also, we can do a replace for the //. Then we can clear the list and we can add the new delimiter. We took the first character excluding the // and we can get the semicolon. So now the splitted numbers will be the delimiters to an array. Let's run our test, and all passed. We're good. Let's see our next requirement. It says calling add with a negative number will throw an exception, negatives not allowed, and the negative that was passed. If there are multiple negatives, show all of them in the exception message. And it says stop here if you are a beginner. So this will be our last test method. So let's try it. Okay, so let's create our method. Let's name the method sum number 1 and -2 and -5. It will throw an exception. So this is interesting because I'm expecting a good result. I'm expecting an exception. So my test has to be able to return this exception. It has to fail. So we can do it like this. In the act, we can create a try catch. We can send the string like this, 1, -2, and -5. We can assert that would fail. So if this passed and does not throw an exception, we assert a fail, and the test will not pass, it would fail. But if an exception is true, we can assert the message we expected. Negatives are not allowed. And we expect -2 and -5 in this message to be equal to the exception message. So this structure is kind of different. We arrange, we act, and we assert. But this assert fail will make the test fail, and this assert is what we expect in this test. Negatives are not allowed. So throw an exception and send a message. Negatives are not allowed, showing the negative numbers. So it is a long name for the test, but if this is clear, I think we're good. Remember that if another programmer read this, they have to know, he has to know what the test is doing. So let's try it. And it fails. It says expected string length 31, but was 40. So another interesting thing is that we can do this. We can click here, put a breakpoint, and with resharper debug this method. So I hit F11, go here to my method, F10, and I can see is making the zoom, and it says -6, and the method is okay because it's zooming, but negatives are not allowed, so it would assert a fail. Expected negatives are not allowed, -2 and -5, but was expected to fail, but instead returned 6. Okay, so let's refactor our method, StringCalculator, the add method, and we can create a string with the numbers that we want to return. We can ask if the number is less than 0 and say numbers or negatives plus the number and comma. We concatenate the negative numbers to this string variable. Then if this negative string is not empty or string, is not null or empty, we can throw a new exception. and we say negatives are not allowed. Close the negatives from the variable string, but without the last comma. Okay, let's test. Let's run our test, and still we got a problem. We expected -2 and -5, but it says negatives are not allowed for 2 and 3. Something is wrong. Let's put here a true string. Let's run it again. And it passed. All passed. So we had a mistake here. So we're good with the test. So remember that first we create the test. We follow the pattern, arrange, act, and assert. The method naming has to be the unit, the scenario, and the expected result. After we create the test, we make it fail, and then we refactor our method. Okay, so I think we're ready to create our next layer. So let's add a new project, a class library called Kata.businesslogic. We can then hit Alt Enter and move to StringCalculator CS. Okay, so we create a new class here in a file, and we can then move this file to our new project. Let's erase this one, and I'll enter in the next space to move to Kata Business Logic. If we get back here, we delete the StringCalculator class and then import the dependency. So now we got a reference to our new project, the business logic. So that was easy. Okay, let's add a new project to our solution. Right click, add new project. This will be a web MVC4 web application. And we are going to call it kata.client. It will be a basic Razor template. Okay, let's set this to as a start project. Let's create a new controller. Right click, add controller, and let's call it home. Let's right click here and add a view, and in here we're going to say Kata StringCalculator and H1 TDD. So let's run it. Okay, we got our ASP.NET MVC4 project running. Let's put some logic in the controller. So I'm going to create a new public action result for the index, which is going to receive the numbers. We'll return the view, but it will be an HTTP post. So I'm going to need the string calculator, new instance, and I'm going to add the numbers, and I will get a result. So also, if we go here to the model folder, we can create a new class. Right click, add class with the name result model. Make it public and create a property integer result, and I can return a new instance of that result model with the result equal to result. So my view is going to receive this result. Let's clean up this reference. So let's change a little bit the view. So I'm expecting a model to be the Kata client models result model, and going to use a form. So I use the statement begin form, put an input with the ID numbers, name, numbers, and the type text. Also, I'm going to need a button with the type of submit. I also can check if the model is not null before I can put the result that comes from the post. So let's try it. And remember that I can send an empty string, and I expected the result to be 0, and it looks okay. Then I can send the number 1, and the result is 1. I can send 1, 2, and the result is 3. We are doing good. Let's try 1, 2, 5, and 8. Let's try 1, 2, new line 3, and we got an error. We expected 6, but the result was 1. But the error is not in the string calculator, but instead in the home controller, because if we put a breakpoint here and resend this string, we get the following string: double dash and 3. So this is called special character or escape characters in web technology. So we can do the following. We can say numbers are equal to regx on escape the numbers. So this will get rid of the extra slash that the view is sending. So let's try it again, and I think we're good. Let's try a new separator. We expected 3, and I think everything is working just fine. Thanks for watching.